Hello friends, welcome to UPSC Logics and my name is Siddharth and today I'm going to discuss the Third Anglo Maratha conflict or the Third Anglo Maratha War. So this was the third war in the series of Anglo Maratha wars, and the Britishers, from losing the first war, they gained traction during the second war, and the Third Anglo Maratha conflict was the nail in the coffin of the Marathas. So this particular war happened in 1817-1818, and this is a part of the modern Indian history. So we shall have a look at the causes for the war, the results of the war, and the treaties that happened due to this particular war. So let us begin this topic. Now we all know that there were a number of envoys that were appointed to the Maratha courts. So we know that Mount Stuart Elphinstone was appointed to Raghuji Bhonsle's court through the Treaty of Devgaon 1803, and John Malcolm was designated as the first British envoy to the courts of the Sindhyas, and this was done through the Treaty of Surji Arjan Gaon. So now there was a major resentment among the Marathas as they had lost their freedom to the British. And number two was that these particular envoys, in fact, there were a number of envoys that were appointed to different Maratha courts, and they exercised a rigid control over the Maratha chiefs. And these were the two main causes that led to the resentment and the Third Anglo-Maratha War in 1817-1818. Now, there were four main results out of this war, or there were consequences of this war that the Marathas had to suffer. And number one was that the Peshwa was dethroned and pensioned off and sent to Bithur near Kanpur, and all his territories were annexed by the British. So they created the Bombay Presidency out of it. Then number two was that the Kingdom of Satara was made out of Peshwa's land, and this was done basically to satisfy the Maratha pride. Number three was that large number of territories were given by the Maratha chiefs to the company. And number four was that after this war, the Maratha chiefs existed at the mercy of the British. So this particular war brought the Maratha chiefs down on their knees. And after this particular war, they just existed at the whims and fancies of the British and did what the British told them to do. Now, the first treaty that came out of this particular conflict was the Treaty of Pune, and this was signed in 1817 between the Peshwa Bajirao II and the British, and this was signed on June 13, 1817. So the British were apprehensive to let Peshwa Bajirao II stir up anti-British sentiments as well as strengthen his army for hostile action, and therefore this was a new compact supplement to the earlier Treaty of Basan and was signed on June 13, 1817. And according to this new treaty, the Peshwa agreed to give some more land to the British in perpetuity and to abide by all the articles of the Treaty of Basan. So the Treaty of Gwalior was signed between Daulat Rao Scindia and the British, and this was signed before the Third Anglo-Maratha War. So this was a campaign that was being launched by the British against the Pindaris, and therefore they came into an agreement with Daulat Rao Scindia, and this treaty was signed on November 5th, 1817. So according to this treaty, number one was that both the parties would deploy their forces into operations against the Pindaris and the other freebooters. Number two was that Scindia was never to readmit the Pindaris nor lend them any support. Number three was that the Scindias was to place around 5,000 horsemen into active operation against the Pindaris. Number four was that the Scindia's troops were not to change position without the consent of the British, nor was he to reduce the number of horsemen or any other forces during the war. Number five was that the British forces were permitted into the forts of Handi and Asirgarh. And number seven was that the earlier Treaty of Surji Arjan Gaon was no longer valid, and the British could had the liberty to enter into engagements with the rulers of Udaipur, Jodhpur, Kota, Bundi, and other states that were left on the left bank of the Chambal. And number eight was that the Treaty of Surji Arjan Gaon and Mustafapur that was signed on November 22nd, 1805 did not affect the provisions of the new agreement, and the new agreement had to remain in full force. So this treaty virtually made the Sindhya into a mere spectator of the Third Anglo-Maratha War. So Scindia did not take part in the Third Anglo-Maratha War. Now, Treaty of Mandsaur 1818 was concluded on January 6, 1818 between Malhar Holkar II and the British, and this was done during the course of the Third Anglo-Maratha War. So under the terms of this particular treaty, Holkar agreed to number one, to confirm a British commitment to the Pindari chief Nawab Amir Khan and renounce all the claims to the territories that were guaranteed to him. Number two was that he was to give Raja Jalim Singh of Kota the four parganas rented by the Raja. Number three was that he was to give into the British claims of tribute and revenues of the Rajas of Udaipur, Jaipur, Jodhpur, Kota, Bundi and Karoli. Number four was that he was to renounce all the claims to the territories within the north of Bundi Hills. Number five was he was to give the British all the territories and claims south of the Satpura Hills. Then he was to station the British field force to maintain his internal security. And number seven was that he was to discharge his superfluous troops while agreeing not to keep a larger force than what his revenues could sustain. Number 8 was that he was not to employ any European without the company's consent. And number 9, he was to receive an accredited British minister. And in turn, the British undertook never to permit the Peshwa or his heirs and successors to claim or exercise any rights over Malhar Holkar II or his heirs and successors. So this was kind of a one-way treaty where Malhar Holkar lost everything to the British, and in return all he got was that the British undertook that the Peshwa and his heirs would never exercise any control over Malhar Holkar and his successors. Now let us have a look at the Pindari War, and this also happened during 1817-1818, and we know that the British signed a number of treaties with different rulers or the Maratha rulers in their campaign against the Pindaris. So Pindaris were basically a race and they were allies with the Pathans and had gradually spread to the areas that were directly held or indirectly ruled by the company. And it was with the approval of the Court of Directors that Governor General Hastings assembled a large force to round up and exterminate the seemingly lawless Pindari hordes and their chiefs. So their chiefs were Karim Khan, Wasil Muhammad and Chintu, and they were surrounded in Malwa and the Pindaris fled to Mewar, but they were forced to retreat. And on this retreat, they suffered heavy casualties in the process, and Karim Khan submitted and was offered an estate in Gawashpur. Wasil Muhammad was forced to lay down arms and died in captivity, and Chintu was defeated and never heard of again. So this particular operation lasted over a year, and Pintaris were almost totally annihilated. So friends, this brings us to the end of the Third Anglo-Maratha War, and as we know, this war led the Maratha chiefs to live on the mercy of the British after this particular war. So if you have enjoyed this video, do like and subscribe to the channel if you are watching it for the first time. And don't forget to press the bell icon for the latest notifications from UPSC Logics. So new videos are almost uploaded every 2 to 3 days, or whenever I get time I upload every day. So thank you so much for watching, and Jai Hind.